have the ability to recommend.
Welcome to the November 21st meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I'll call the meeting to order and take approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Rasmussen, second by Briggs. Discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Director Rosser, would you please read the mission statement?
The mission of the Ames Community Schools is to ensure that all learners develop the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and personal esteem necessary to grow and shape a changing society.
Thank you. Our first item tonight is the public forum. We have 4 people wishing to speak. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, district staff may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish must speak up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 3 minutes once per board meeting. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. We ask speakers to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. So we're going to have 3 individuals come up at the same time to give a discussion to us. So Helen, Chase, and Karen.
Helen Zedfich, 3300 Eisenhower Avenue. I have Chase Colton, 2226 Northwestern Avenue, and Karen Simons, 2714 Valley View Circle. Good evening. We're here this evening because we believe that the literacy plan for the district has become a political tug-of-war, and the district administrators have lost sight of the true goal. 80% of Ames Community School District students will be successful readers and writers regardless of the literacy program we use. Our district's data shows this. Up to this point, our teachers have only had the Iowa Common Core as their curriculum and have had to find their own materials to address the Common Core standards. However, the other 20% of students are not succeeding, and again, our data shows this. Research also states that if children are not reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade, they are more likely to drop out of school, commit crimes, and not be successful. Many of the students in the bottom 20% have specific learning disabilities, of which dyslexia is the most common. Many are African American and English as a second language learners. As a board, you need to be addressing their literacy needs. It has been said by one of the board members, this will be one of the most important decisions our board will make. It is therefore your duty as a board to be well informed, not solely by the administrators and the word study team, but by others in the district. Sorry, I've lost my place. Parents may not be experts in the true meaning of the word, but we have become self-trained experts because our children did not receive proper instruction in reading. Please don't dismiss our hard-earned expertise. I also encourage you to look beyond the district and seek out other experts who have used or studied structured literacy programs. Another issue that is distracting from the literacy plan is the often repeated suggestion that Fellows Elementary inappropriately purchased foundations. The district administration approved the purchase of foundations to be used in a 3-year action research project starting at the beginning of the school year 2015-16. If it should have been brought to the board's attention and voted on, it is on you to ask these questions to the administrators and not fault Fellows. Teachers at Fellows came to the Fellows PTO and asked if the PTO could fund the purchase of additional foundations materials for the last 3 classrooms, kindergarten through 2nd. The PTO unanimously approved the request because they believe that every child in our school deserved the best resources available. Again, this was approved by administrators in the district. If this was supposed to be brought to the board for a vote, then it's up to you to question the administrators who signed off on this allocation. Please stop questioning the integrity of Fellows staff and PTO. It is also not helpful for members of the board to repeatedly state that the original pilot discussed in May 2016 would have been approved if it had been voted on. Not only were 2 of the 3 programs inappropriate reading programs, but the manner in which the pilots were selected were inappropriate. The word study team voted that fellows would keep Foundations as a pilot along with another school in Ames. 2 other schools would pilot Words Their Way, and the 5th Making Sense of Phonics. The same proposal was presented to parents at a meeting in the afternoon of May 19th, and although we did not agree on the 2 programs, we were happy that Foundations would be at Fellows. However, unbeknown to anyone, a meeting had taken place earlier on May 19th with principals and I assume district administrators, and the pilot was modified to be in every school piloting every program, 1 in each grade. That's when things changed. Parents and teachers and board members had been given completely different information. Again, it was on you to question the district administrators and not to question teachers or parents at Fellows. As a board, you need to ask the district why only Tier 1 materials are being looked at. Our students who struggle to read and write in the general ed classrooms, these students are the ones that have been identified as persistently at risk in reading. They are the students who will be held back or required to attend summer school in May 2018. Why are we looking at Tier 1? It has been stated multiple times that the district needs common language across all grades and schools. This common language is needed in Tiers 1, 2 and 3 because struggling readers move back and forth between the tiers the most. A common language is essential to ensure these students become proficient readers.
We've requested several times for a copy of the results from the initial vetting of materials that were being considered for the pilot to be shared. I found it deeply disturbing to learn last Wednesday night that half of the word study team never vetted the materials. Dr. Taylor firmly stated at the last board meeting that it was his moral and ethical responsibility to make sure that kids get proven sets of materials. Yet the materials being implemented in our children's classrooms for the pilot program were not thoroughly vetted. Half of the word study team never evaluated them. I had supported the choice of pilot materials because a rubric developed by the Florida Center for Reading Research had been selected to use with help from the Iowa Reading Research Center, and I trusted that due diligence would be used to vet each program using the agreed-upon rubric in order to select the top performers. How can you honestly stand by your words and your choice of the 3 sets of materials when they clearly weren't vetted before being used with our children? The Iowa Reading Research Center has offered to evaluate the pilot materials you selected using the rubric the district decided on. Can you ask that they do this? I still request to see the partial vetting of the materials in the interest of transparency. We've asked for a copy of the gap analysis that was performed across the district. On the district's website for the word study team, it states there are district-identified gaps around phonemic awareness, phonics, spelling, and handwriting. During the June 20th, 2016 board meeting, Dr. Taylor stated that phonics and multisensory instruction were identified as missing. During the November 11th, 2016 meeting, Dr. Taylor states there was one sliver of phonics missing. I was also told by the administration less than a week ago that the pilot is not intended to address the needs of dyslexic students. In the interest of clarification, can the actual gap analysis be provided to the public? Lastly, I'd like to get past a point that is repeatedly brought up. We're all well aware that Fellows is invested and has 100% teacher buy-in for one set of materials in the current pilot. On Wednesday night, Dr. Taylor stated this was echoed in other schools for other sets of materials. Yet none of the pilot materials was in place in any of the other schools before the pilot started on October 25th. How can other schools echo support for another set of materials after just a couple of weeks? Which schools have 100% parent-teacher buy-in for National Geographic Learning Reach into Phonics? Which schools have 100% teacher buy-in for Fontes and Pinnell phonics lessons? Can someone please defend this statement that is repeatedly thrown out? And if you can't, can you please stop stating it?
In conclusion, the items previously shared have led to an erosion of trust with the Ames Community School District leadership. At the October 25th, 2015 school board meeting, there appeared to be strong support for the Foundation's literacy program and the potential it held for our schools. Why the shift in enthusiasm and support? We are deeply concerned with the apparent politically charged decision-making process of this district. We are earnestly requesting that the following items remain first and foremost as we move through this pilot together as a district. 1, the needs of children with learning disabilities need to be an integral component of the selected literacy materials. You are significant advocates for their learning environment. Please don't take this responsibility lightly, especially as the deadline for third grade reading retention takes effect at the end of the next school year. 2, a fair evaluation of the materials considered with transparent due diligence. You are blessed with a community of teachers and parents who are actively engaged in the education of Ames students. This is a good thing. Maintaining communication that is open and authentic will allow for constructive conversation and the opportunity to reestablish trust. We would like to see the results of the due diligence that we have been assured has taken place. 3, just as the Fellows community has been asked to keep an open mind regarding literacy curriculums, we encourage district leadership to consider that same request. The passion and enthusiasm exhibited by fellow students, staff, and families should not work against a solid literacy program. Thank you for your ongoing hard work to ensure a strong educational experience for all students in our district.
Thank you. Next, we have Annie Almquist.
Hello, my name is Annie Almquist. I live at 808 Hunsaker Drive, and I am also a parent at Fellows, and I'm also here to talk about the pilot tonight. First of all, I would express that I understand both points of view. I think that I really do. And second of all, I just want to advocate for the conversation to continue. I have one idea that I'm going to propose at the end, but more importantly, I just really want this conversation to continue. Again, I think I understand both points of view. As a parent at Fellows with a struggling reader in a pilot classroom, I am grieving over the loss of a program that was successful for my child. I did see progress firsthand, and that loss of potential gain is hard. On the other hand, I used to be a meeker parent, and I imagine that if I was still a meeker parent, I would be asking questions like, why not my child? Why can't my child have access to the same curriculum as the other kids down the street? And I would be asking the administration these questions. If the administration told me that they were adopting a program that was chosen by one of our elementary schools, I honestly don't know how I would react. I might be thrilled if, after seeing all the research, that the district decided to implement a district-wide, empirically based literacy program, or I might question if that same program is going to be effective for my school. I understand the need for a pilot. That being said, this is where I'd like the conversation to continue. I'm proposing that the district hires a part-time staff member to continue teaching foundations to students who opt out of the pilot during that pilot instruction block. I suspect that many of the students opting out would be struggling readers who are receiving supplemental foundations instruction in their Tier 2 classrooms, like my daughter. This exposure would already have marked their data as skewed and not likely to be used by the Iowa Reading Research Center. And I understand that all of this is bigger than all of us. It's bigger than myself, my child, my school, my district, and I believe that this research has the potential to impact hundreds of thousands of students. We can help all of Iowa to move forward. I want this, but I also want to honor the students who are struggling by allowing them to opt out of the pilot and into foundations instruction. Overall, I believe that if we continue to have the pilot as a topic on the agenda, if we continue to have open and honest conversations in the community, and if we continue to work together as a team, we will find a solution that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll close the public forum and go into our first discussion item tonight, art program update. Mary.
I'm Mary Morton. I'm a teacher on special assignment, and one of my areas is art.
I'm Lori Olk, and I teach at Sawyer and Mitchell.
And I'm Cappy Dobbins, and I teach at Ames Middle School.
I'm Michelle Mathias, and I teach at Edwards and Mitchell.
So we're going to spend a little bit of your time tonight giving you an update on the work that art teachers have done last year, and we will continue to do this year in terms of our curriculum review. We will come back in the spring and ask for approval of this work. Right now, it's just for your listening pleasure. It's just informational for you. So I hope this visual looks somewhat familiar to you. I believe Erin Miller brought it to your attention when she shared the work that the music teachers had done. This was designed in the C&I department to try and align our work as we work with multiple different teachers in different content areas and across the grade levels. It's really important to us that we're sending the same message and doing similar work. You'll notice on this visual there are 4 different phases. The first 3 phases above the black line happen with C&I support. The bottom phase, or the 4th phase, happens at the PLC level and mirrors the PLC flowchart that you've seen within our district. Last year, the kindergarten through 12th grade art teachers were able to complete phase 1 and almost all of phase 2. We were able to, in phase 1, identify a guiding document and really did a lot of deep learning around how that document was created, as well as what the standards mean. Phase 2 then allowed us to select some essential standards and prioritize those standards, and also to have some horizontal and vertical conversations around what the selections were. Our work continues into phase 3 this year as we move into assessments and thinking about what student mastery looks like at each of those standards. And then finally, we're also going to do a little bit of work on instructional methods, which I'll talk about in just a minute. I'm going to give the mic over to Cappy to talk a little bit about the guiding document that we selected and dug into.
As an overview for the National Core Art Standards, I would like to share that the conceptual framework for this document was in defining artistic literacy. So what is artistic literacy and how do our kids arrive at that by graduation? It is broken down. The conceptual framework begins with philosophical foundations and moves to lifelong goals that are comprised of these 4 anchor processes. Those are creating, presenting, responding, and connecting. These actually follow the 1997 NAEP blueprint, and this was used as the framework because it's something that other states had already begun to adopt. But basically, each of these anchor standards allows us to have an ultimate learning outcome, which is what comprises the artistic literacy. Anchor standards are broken apart into different outcomes by grade to create a learning progression. And these standards, and I'd like to speak specifically to creating, for example. You can't just say, oh, by graduation you're going to be a creative individual or with a particular lesson. So what we have to do is we have to take and break down the components of creating. And so the artistic processes creating then become broken into different anchor standards. Those anchor standards then are performance over time that become increasingly sophisticated that are easily embedded into the curriculum. That learning progression is our traits, what our look-fors when we're teaching. Those things are easily mapped and also allow us to deconstruct the experiences that allow us to create learning that affords differentiation, that's easily accessible and accessible. So for example, in the creating strand, just very briefly, the creating artistic process is conceiving and developing new artistic ideas of work. Well, that's very broad and general. But then the anchor standards are broken down into generate and conceptualize artistic ideas and work, organize and develop artistic ideas, and refine and complete. So then a scope and a sequence at the middle school is taking and breaking that down to where in the 6th grade, we are working to demonstrate openness in trying new ideas, materials, methods, and approaches, which that's developmentally appropriate. Then we move into applying methods to overcome those creative blocks. Then we move into, in the 8th grade, demonstrate willingness to experiment, innovate, and take risk in that art making process. So the standards are wonderful in that they are based on processes that guide us in helping our students achieve artistic literacy.
So once we had the opportunity to really dig into the philosophical shifts that these national standards provide, and also what each separate standard means, we were able to enter phase 3 and consider which of these standards we wanted to prioritize and select as essential standards. I wanted to make a point that we're using a common process across all content areas. So the process that the art teachers went through to determine which standards would be the most essential of all of the standards is the same process that other content areas have used. We looked at each standard in terms of its leverage, endurance, and readiness. Quickly, leverage is the idea that a particular art standard has ramifications in other content areas. Perhaps it's something that can be applied in math or something that could be applied in a writing kind of a task. Endurance is the idea that the standard or skill would endure over time, possibly even a skill that could be useful in adult life. And finally, readiness would be any of those standards that would be appropriate as prerequisite skills that would then support any future standards that would come. So the teachers had great conversations around endurance, leverage, and readiness and these standards, and trying to make a decision about which standards seem to float to the top in terms of these different characteristics. And then we also had an opportunity to have conversations vertically as we looked at the selections that were made in terms of, did we see any gaps, omissions, or repetitions in these standards, kindergarten through high school? And if we did see any of those gaps, omissions, or repetitions, were we comfortable with them? Were they gaps that made sense that we could provide a rationale behind? So our next steps, as I mentioned, we're moving into phase 3. A big part of phase 3 includes assessments, and we will be spending some time developing some rubrics and some common formative assessments in which we'll probably do some unpacking of the standards as well. One very unique thing about these standards is that they're very, as Cappy said, process-oriented. It's not about a specific skill. It's about a bigger concept, almost a 21st century skill kind of feel that transcends different content areas and is very powerful. And so creating rubrics that will align with some of those standards is going to be really challenging but exciting work that we've started talking about. And I think we're all pretty excited to get started on it and see how it transforms our instruction. The other piece that we are working on is because the philosophical shift and the shift from product to process that these standards calls for, we're thinking about our instruction. How does that impact our instruction in the classroom? How do we make sure that we're highlighting those processes in what we do? And so we've got specifically teaching artistic behavior, some other quality instruction pieces we're looking at. We have a couple book clubs that are going, and we'd like to go and observe some other classrooms and other districts that have some of these pieces in place, hopefully this spring. So finally, we wanted to showcase some of our students' artwork so you could see the actual standards in action. So what you're going to see as we move through these slides is a progression of artwork, just a little snippet from every grade level from kindergarten through high school. And we also have the standard either noted or a portion of the standard indicated on the slide also, so you can see what some of the rigor of these standards really is. Cappy gave you a little taste of how meaty and rigorous the standards really are. So we wanted to give you an opportunity just in the next few slides to look at not only how the standards are written and how rigorous some of them are, but also the progression of artwork. Just enjoy the progression of artwork and how it builds from kindergarten all the way up through high school. So this is an example of a kindergarten task where they're using line to create art. And in first grade, they're moving to not just creating their own art, but including knowledge of other artists within their artwork. Second grade, solving artistic problems independently. You can very easily see how that would transcend into all areas, and not only in school, but outside of school as well. Third grade, being able to generate more than one idea, moving past that initial idea and thinking beyond that. Again, also transcends into many different areas. Fourth grade, taking something that's in a three-dimensional form and creating a drawing from it. Fifth grade, researching an artist and critiquing, evaluating that work. The middle school, demonstrate an openness in trying new ideas, methods, materials, and approaches. Also at the middle school, demonstrating a willingness to experiment and innovate and to take risks, to pursue ideas, forms, and meanings in artwork. From the high school, collaboratively shape an artistic investigation and then generate two-dimensional ideas using art elements and principles. And finally, at the high school, expressing ideas creatively while challenging imagination, fostering reflective thinking, and developing a disciplined effort and problem-solving skills. Also, I hope that you take an opportunity to look at the artwork that's on display here at the district office. It's on either outside hallway here. I believe we have 6 pieces of art from the high school that are on display currently. The art teachers called for an opportunity to display some of their artwork here at this beautiful new building that we have. And so we have a monthly rotation where every building will have an opportunity to show off some of their students' artwork. So when you're here, take an opportunity to check out the artwork on either hallway. It's pretty incredible artwork I think you're going to see on display. We wanted to thank you for not only the time to share an update, but also just for your continued support of our art students. As you can see, these ladies do amazing work with students, and it's really awe-inspiring the work that they've actually put in the last year, and I know they will continue to put in this year. It's been really fun working with this team. Also, please know that we'll come back in the spring, and we'll seek some approval for the standards on the work that we've done. Do you have any questions?
In the meeting prior to this one, we met with the United School Board, and I heard a term that I've never heard before. I heard the term STEAM instead of simply STEM, and so I see some of these standards have some broad scope. Is STEAM part of that? So science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
If you can imagine engineering being an integrator in STEAM, in STEM education, art becomes the integrator as well. And so it actually opens up all kinds of different types of cognitive processes that aren't necessarily, that we're not pushing as well as we could through experience. So, even just basic skills like dimensional thinking, how do you, pattern seeking, pattern finding, these are the types of things that are thinking processes for our young learners to possess in order to be able to do these types of processes in the STEM field. So there's been an ongoing push. I think actually Lori's more vocal about that.
Right. The STEAM initiative has been around for about 15 years or more on the East Coast, and it's working its way this way. And in fact, the STEM kits that United got included several art components, like a sewing machine and a felting kit. And so even though STEAM isn't the word used in Iowa, we still use the word STEM, but the governor's task force does acknowledge and recognize the importance of STEAM education, including the arts into that whole process, as well as the representative from Iowa State that is on the governor's STEM board that's from ISU Extension. So the terminology isn't there, but the process is there.
Any other questions from the board? Comments?
Thank you for sharing the artwork along with the standards. As someone not in the art field, it was very helpful and neat to see the growth of the students' artwork. So thank you for sharing that and for all the work you're doing.
Thank you. Our next discussion tonight, Board Security Ad Hoc Committee. Dr. Taylor and Rodney.
I think Director Briggs, if I start this off, this was actually initiated by Director Briggs, and I believe you approached our board president relative to a temporary committee to take a look at our security measures in just about all of our buildings. And the impetus that was behind this was that now that our elementary buildings are complete, we do have a security vestibule at the high school. We'll be in the process of wrapping up a security vestibule at the middle school so that all of our buildings will be in the same position. And even though a couple buildings have been open for a couple of years, we still needed some help, I think, from the outside and from professionals. And through just committee work to take a look at our security that we have in place in our buildings at the present time and look for some procedural guidance and some security training. And I think Director Briggs has already visited with members of the Ames Police Department who are pretty gifted in those particular areas, but I'm going to turn it over to him.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea here is from policy. How do we create a policy to address these new features that we've never had to deal with before? And then to do so in a manner that creates a uniform practice, because the last thing I want is our buildings to feel like they're prisons, but I want castles. I want them to be warm, safe places where people can go, that they know that they're going to be safe while they're in them. They're inviting, they welcome people in, while protecting the people that are within them. So how do we create a policy that presents us as a castle as opposed to the alternative? And in the process of doing that, I was noticing myself that there may be a few places where we could better ourselves. One building might be a little different than another in one regard or something like that. So I wanted to look at where are our shortcomings, as well as how can we, with what we have in place now, create that environment. So I've talked with the school resource officer for Ames PD, and he's very excited to have an opportunity to be a part of this committee and to help address some of these issues. He also said that the Ames Police Department has a group of individuals that go around and do security audits on buildings. They've been trained specifically to look at security, identify shortfalls, as well as to give guidance with regards to procedure. So I think we've got a great opportunity before us to address some of these concerns that some people in the public have even addressed with regards to not sure how the process works, so that we can get something in place that's secure, that works and does what we want it to, and do so without putting it on myself and other members of the staff that might not be fully trained to address some of these concerns.
I think as a cap on this, the thing that really I think has me very interested is trying to establish some uniform procedures that we use district-wide from building to building, so we can create some consistency when parents come from, or visitors come to any of our buildings. They know what to expect each and every time that they show up. So this was, I think, an opportunity when Director Briggs came to me about this. This is something we could probably do in meetings once a month from now until April. And by that time, perhaps have something that we can put in the hands of our policy committee to help bolster our security measures district-wide. So we're trying to follow our board policy relative to new or revised policies, and that we wanted to come forward at this time for discussion from the rest of the board based upon what we thought we would try to accomplish at this point before we move forward.
Well, Rodney, I support you in this endeavor, and I appreciate you taking this on. The only feedback I have is I've heard grumblings, with the start of the new Raptor system, that it's a challenge for parents to get in there, and you're going to have that. But just, I think, be mindful of, and you talked about it, is how do we create this environment that encourages people to come in, but making sure safety is at the forefront. So, I'm sure you're aware, but please know there's grumblings.
Yeah, and I've heard some of that too, and then that's partially one of the things that I want to look at deeper to identify what the discrepancies are, so that we can hopefully address those concerns and do so in a manner that doesn't weaken our stance with regards to safety, but also creates a more inviting environment for the parent.
On that note, I'm wondering, I'm looking at the membership of the committee, that it will include but not be limited to, but maybe consider adding a parent or two to get someone outside of the school district, so that we can have that perspective. Possibly would help. I know you can't have a huge committee because you won't be able to get together, but maybe a thought on that.
Yeah, and I have no objection to that. I wanted to create a committee that had individuals that were affected at every level of the process, because it doesn't do me any good to write a policy if the people that have to implement that policy find it to be strenuous at best. So it needs to have all of the people that are affected involved in the process, so that when we create a policy, we create something that works, that's efficient and effective.
I'll back up what Director Franzen said, though, because we've made outreach one of our initiatives that we want to be reaching out to parents. We want to have parents actively involved. If we could I could see that. I didn't think about that until she just said that. I'd heard a little bit about this just because of the policy committee, and was supportive of it at that time, but asked Director Briggs to take it outside our policy committee because I didn't feel that initiating this through the policy committee was the right thing to do. If we do this, his recommendations will come back to us, and I'm sure it'll lead to policies, but it didn't feel right to initiate it that direction. From what I'm reading here and what I've heard from Director Briggs, if he's willing to take the lead on this and has some buy-in from the police department, I'd be in full support of, at least letting him draw up this plan and seeing where it leads. But yeah, I do think maybe some parent involvement could be nice. I'm glad that you included the secretaries because they're the ones that are certainly implementing that at the front door of all our buildings. And I will say in some meetings I had last week, I went to 3 elementary schools and I was treated differently at each one. At no point did I feel that the safety of getting in the building was in question, but whether the ID was being kept or not being kept or checking in or whatever, it was different in each building. That's the type of things that I think you want to tighten up. So.
Exactly. And yeah, I'll definitely, if the parents weren't identified in here, that's an oversight on my part, because like I said, my goal in working down the structure was to try and capture every player that had a piece in this puzzle. So
great. Any feedback from anyone else? Okay.
No. We'll bring this back on December 5 for board approval and perhaps maybe tweak it a little bit more based upon this discussion.
Great. Thank you. Next is board committee reports. Updates, most provided.
I'll just update on the ISB assembly that I attended after many years of service by Mr. Espacet down there. Yeah, it was fun, Mike. But I'd like to share that we as a board had recommended I think it was 4 or 5 priorities that we sent up to the committee or for the assembly to consider. And of the 5 that we submitted, the assembly ended up supporting 4 legislative priorities for the year for 2017, and 3 of the ones that we suggested are in those 4, and that is the resolution regarding school funding, the resolution regarding supplemental state aids, and of course the 1-cent sales tax preservation and getting rid of the sunset in 2029. So that was good. The rest of the assembly consisted of passing other resolutions and many details. If you'd like to go to the website, I'm not going to go into that, but it was a lively discussion, and I think we wrapped up started around 9, and I think we wrapped up at about 11:30.
Policy committee doesn't have an update on there, but 90% of the rest of our agenda tonight is policy committee discussions so we'll be having all those here in a little bit. Director Friend, I don't know if that was an official teaching and learning.
It wasn't.
It was not a teaching and learning assignment to be here. What was that, last Wednesday night?
Wednesday.
And so Dr. Deborah Reed came up, met with Dan Andrews was here, Dr. Ross was here, and met with fairly large group of parents regarding the word study team and the literacy plan. I think that conversation, I had to leave due to a prior commitment. I left about, a little before 8, but I think conversation went till 9:30. We'll see how we take some of the recommendations. We're still hearing recommendations from people, things that they would like to see changed, and certainly taking all that under advisement. But I'm glad to see that many parents involved, paying attention and trying to keep the conversation flowing. So that's a good thing.
We will have another facilities committee meeting on Wednesday, or it's actually Tuesday, I believe, the 29th of November. We did have a nice facilities committee meeting last time relative to the swimming pool as a future project, and also Ames High. There were several assignments that were handed out for Jerry and for and also Chris, and we did happen to get information back from Linmar relative to their programming, which helps support their enterprise fund, which then in turn helps support the operational costs of their swimming facilities over there. That's one of the things we'll be sharing during the facilities committee meeting. I believe it's Tuesday the 29th.
We'd like to update the board. The Real Estate Liquidation Committee has continued outreach to the neighborhood groups. Met with all groups last week, so that dialogue is ongoing, and more information to come on that. But all the neighborhood groups are appreciative of our dialogue. Anything else? Board committees? All right, moving on. Policies for discussion. BCE and KG. Rodney and Tim.
Both of these have kind of been in and out. The first one is regarding board committee structure, and we've kind of mulled over some of the suggestions that came out, and we really hesitated to identify an amount of time in here that was greater than that required by law, substantially greater than that required by law. But we did feel that there was merit in identifying that we would not only post them in the specified place and location, but also using our website to help get that information out, and identifying that in the policy was a good idea, we thought. Beyond that, we wanted to make sure that the board president was identified as being a member of all of the committees. And then the language with regards to the directors that Director Rasmussen brought forward, being able to attend but not being able to be a part of the committee when they are in attendance. Beyond that, that's pretty much it with that policy. The other one is one that we've brought in and out a couple of times over the last year, and that is the KG community use of school facilities. And through working the policy rewrite and then working for quite a while at the last meeting on the administrative rules side, we did tweak some of the verbiage in the policy once again. And that's just simply identifying the level 4 tier as being a civic events, and then the level 5 tier just categorized as other events, and getting out of trying to really label them to one specific thing. And then with regards to the administrative rules, a lot of that was done by Jerry and his staff, as well as Dr. Taylor and his staff. And Tim and I were more there for the show and giving our ideas and thoughts where it was warranted, but they're really the ones that had a big hand in writing those rules. So.
Jerry, you may want to come forward in case we have some questions here relative to this policy. And as I think as Rodney pointed out here on the community use of facilities, we're at that point where we've kicked it around probably in our committee for a good 2 or 3 hours trying to get this one figured out, because it is very complex. Every time you think you've got something figured out, there's another one that, another situation that kind of throws a little monkey in there.
I think there were some individual meetings where we kicked it around for 2 or 3 hours. So I would say in our committee, it's probably pushing 15 in all reality. I mean, and I think the revisions reflect what was told to the public that we wanted to do, that we want these buildings used outside school hours. It's in our best interest to have students and parents in these buildings outside normal school hours. And that's what we promised to them with the bond issue, and I think this policy reflects that, and you know, is finally ready to come forward, and you know, certainly there's time for input if anybody sees revisions, but Jerry, go ahead.
Now, like you said, I think, you know, we've worked through this policy quite a bit. One of the challenges that we have is that the buildings are primarily built for schools, and so we aren't really looking at trying to create a building that we're going to rent and generate revenue. Basically, we're going to offer them, open up the buildings for use by the community, and with the charges or the costs that are incurred, we're only looking at being able to recover or recoup the cost that it takes. So that's part of the challenge with being able to work with different groups and different organizations. And like I said, we can offer the spaces that we have, and we need to be able to just be able to recover our costs. And that was most of the formatting and the formula, try and figure out how to make that with the diversity of groups and so on.
I think the conversation you and I had earlier this evening really kind of it hits the button pretty good, I think, which is we're not really in the rental business. We're in the school business, but we have some facilities people would like to use. And so we want to open it up for them to be able to use it, but under our particular rules. And sometimes people think because they're public buildings, they can do things that probably they would not normally do. So we have to monitor those things. But it's really an opportunity to open our buildings for people who want to use them and use them according to our rules. But it's not a rental business.
So one of the things that Lisa and I brought up at agenda setting last week was the idea of Parks and Rec has been an ongoing discussion between City Council and us for some time, and in our leadership meetings with the city, you know, that always gets brought up. So the thing I was asking is, okay, what's the impact for them? But this policy does not speak to a cost, so that's going to be brought up through a letter of agreement, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So will that be brought back to the board, or will that be through just administrative action for what that would be?
That will be any letter of agreement, which of course would require board action for approval on that. So it will be brought back to the board.
Okay. So I'm supportive of the structure. I know we've talked about nonprofit, not, and what that looks like, but I think this does a pretty good job of outlining the gist of what we're trying to accomplish. And I've told Tim this, Dr. Taylor, this before, that just understanding what that impact to the city is important, and primarily kids in Parks and Rec, but also then adults too in the community. So I'm supportive of the changes that are here.
And I think this goes back a lot to some comments from Director Talbot, which is we used or built these buildings with public money for the most part. So we want the public to come in, and it's really a cost recovery motive on our part.
So I have a couple of questions around the cost of rentals. So the building rental rate, so if I wanted to rent a multi-purpose room somewhere, it'd be $40 an hour for the minimum 2-hour charge. And then in addition to that, a custodial charge, or is the custodial charge wound up in that hourly rate?
The custodial charges would be separate beyond normal working custodial hours. So if the rental occurs during the time when a custodian is on staff, we don't increase the cost for a custodial. The custodial cost would be if you were to do it on a Saturday where we don't have any staff on duty, then we'd need to be able to we want to be able to have somebody there to be able to supervise or be available in case, to be able to react and respond to issues, but they would be there beyond the custodial hours.
Do we have that capacity, Jerry? I mean, do we have that capacity with staff to be able to have people on demand? I'm just curious.
As far as being able to provide custodians it's a challenge because we're limited, and so we have to go with overtime when we're on beyond the hours. But other than that, it's a matter of kind of adjusting the schedule to be able to follow around after a group uses a space to be able to get back through and get it cared for and cleaned up.
Okay.
Secondly, I noticed two buildings missing here that I think would be attractive to rent, namely this one and the facilities building. So if I want to have a public meeting or something like that, how do we need to provide a schedule for those? And some of the buildings are more of a challenge to use during a school day, others not so much. The facilities building, like the meeting room there, for example, might not be used up during a day, or very often this meeting room might not be used up as much. So have we contemplated these facilities in this policy?
Not quite. I think when we started working on the policy, it was prior to this building actually opening up. So I think time progresses along. So we hadn't thought about that. I do know that this room gets used quite a bit during the week. So it'd be a matter of being able to just coordinate schedule and kind of after hours type of thing.
Yeah, so if the chamber calls or insert name here, if some scouting organization calls, if they want to have some sort of a meeting here, what of all of this would apply? And does it matter if it's during the day or after hours?
Good question. In that case, we'd need to handle that on a case-by-case basis and follow the guidance that we have already established in the policy.
Yeah, the policy itself doesn't lay out any specific buildings per se, so it's really, do we as a district, do we as administrators feel that this building should be offered up for that purpose, and then just determining what those costs should be if it is.
We were contacted about, I think 3 weeks ago from the Chamber and Ames Economic Development Commission, who were having a joint board meeting, and their site got canceled somewhere, so we opened this room up for that particular meeting. It lasted 1 hour. There, of course, because they were a nonprofit, there was no charge to them. We were here, and so was a custodian. It kind of falls within that same range that we have within our building rental rates and our categories. So I think we can make that apply, but I think it's also something we need to think about a little bit more and bring it back to our policy committee before we bring it back to the board, perhaps for final approval or just first approval, let's put it that way, on December 5.
I mean, it does cite that for all of the other buildings, that it's after regular school hours. I mean, if we're to open up this building, I'm envisioning that this room is somewhat fluid, and that there's times that you thought you were going to meet in one of the other smaller conference rooms, and it gets bumped in here because there's more people or it's crowded or something like that. Does that happen? Is this room getting used impromptu like that sometimes?
Yeah, we had a neighborhood meeting with the Edwards neighborhood that I thought we were going to fit in conference room C, and it got bumped in here because of the number of people that were involved. So that does happen.
So unless it's a special occasion, we'd want to keep this room available for daytime use during school hours, because that's when you're here, and the potential is that we need it for our purpose.
One of the things I think also that gives Mr. Hare a rash sometimes is all the technology that's sitting in front of our directors right here. Obviously, with all the technology that's here, we sometimes worry about making sure that there's some kind of supervision from one of us on the administrative team or somewhere to make sure that people aren't, and I think the big crisis was eating or something up at this table or messing around with some of the technology that we've got. As long as they don't get back into the control room, we're fairly safe.
I have a question regarding how and in which category would you put some examples in here, like Boys and Girls Club for one category, and also I think the other example was in category 2, I'm thinking. But what about raising readers in Story County? Which category would they fall into?
Raising Readers, I believe, is a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. So they would fall into category...
Probably into category 2. It's a non-for-profit, youth-centered organization, to my knowledge.
Right, right. Because I know they've, in the past, made requests about, in particular, gaining access in the summer to some of our elementaries for their summer programs. Where have we stood in that? There's been some resistance, and what are the problems? How can we overcome that? And does this policy enable that at all?
I think this policy specifically addresses that group and any other similar group. I mean, that was what Director Briggs brought to the policy committee. I'd have to look back at the notes to know how long we've been debating this thing.
Over a year.
Yeah, well over a year that we've been rewriting this. It's probably the most involved and complicated policy in the entire list. And as far as I'm concerned, needs to be written as simply to let Jerry and his department interpret it and make a decision as to whether or not they think what category a group belongs in, and place them in there and recoup our charges if we need to. And so I think that's what we've written, is specifically for that type of group.
Would
we want them in our building.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at. They've been, I guess, making requests in the past few years to provide some programming at Cape Mitchell, and there's been resistance to that. Is it because of the funding that we're requiring funding and they're asking for?
If they were meeting
free,
resistance the last couple of years, it was because the previous policy that this one hopefully replaces would have required them to have secured money to the district in order to do the rental.
Correct.
This policy would erase that.
I don't go back and look at the history of some of those things, and so I don't know what the policy said, and I don't know what the interpretation was, and I don't know what the request was from that group or some of the other groups that we've declined. Moving forward from whatever day, if this policy gets approved somewhat similar to as written, moving forward from the day that it gets approved, I would envision that a group like that would get approved for usage, and I think that Jerry understands that from his conversations with us as a policy committee, that's the direction we were headed, and you know, I think we'd all be on the same page. So, right. Moving forward, I think it's correct, but I haven't looked back at the history of all that. There's a few other things in policy committee that, at some point we might want to go back and review to figure out how we got where we were, but that isn't what we didn't really debate that in committee, trying to figure out what happened and why. We really just tried to figure out how to move forward with the promise that we gave to the public that we were going to make these buildings available when they were all built.
That's great. And I remember both of you saying that at various times in relation to this procedure. And I only raised the question because I've had a number of people from that organization say, hey, we'd really like to. So I'm really glad to hear, and I look forward to supporting this particular policy change so that we can make those things happen.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
One thing with Mitchell, not this past summer, but the 2 summers prior to that, the building was under construction.
Oh, right.
It might have been that coincidentally that it just happened like that. So the building wasn't really in a rental state, if you will.
Right.
So hopefully that was why, just that practical reality is why that they weren't able to rent from that.
Sure.
So any other guidance, Rodney or Tim, you guys need? You okay with where we're at?
I think going forward, we've got an issue looking at this facility being added to that list potentially, and maybe the facilities complex, but other than that, I didn't really get a lot of feedback here about anything. Did you, Tim?
No, I just want admin staff to tell us as to whether or not they still want it in the policy, specifically that during normal business hours, normal school day hours, that this building is still off limits, because that's the way the policy is written. If we're going to have to write it in that this building is available during those days too, for separate meetings, then that's fine, we can do that, but I'd want that recommendation to come from them as to whether or not they feel like this still has to be off limits. Maybe, if somebody wants it on a Tuesday night, fine, but if it's during normal business hours of teachers, then I think
And that would be my interpretation too. I mean, obviously the school district should have priority, and if we're operating during business hours, during the business day, it really should be our building to use as we need at that point.
It's pretty busy. I think that's been the stance of our administrative team, It's not exactly off limits, but we're going to be very careful about running it during office hours because it is so busy. We do need the space.
But would you, I mean, I guess my real question is, would you want that? I believe we probably need that in the policy if we're going to do that, because
Yeah.
there are little tweaks of policy that have been missed historically, and I want this one written so it's followed. And so do we want it? And that's where you can give us your recommendation on what you want for this building, what you're envisioning for this building. I don't think I'm going to want to attempt with my one vote here to dictate how you operate this building. And so if you want to allow somebody like the Chamber of Commerce or Ames Economic Development to come in here during a Tuesday afternoon because you think that it would be productive use of the building and you can allow that, then I think we probably need to write it into the policy that is still, that this building different than our elementary schools, because we're not going to allow something like that in our elementary schools. That is not going to happen. And so, you bring us your recommendation on that back to policy committee the next time, and we'll tweak those words and move forward.
Okay. Luke, before we move on, I'd like to go back to board committees language, and I'd like to thank my fellow board members by looking at the suggestions that regarding putting on the website our committee agendas and times and locations. I appreciate your effort noticing that is instrumental in achieving one of our 5 goals that we as a board just passed. Our goal, and they weren't in any particular order, but just to, remind us, it was to reach out to them where they are, solidify and proactively, comprehensively, and be transparent in our communication system, targeted, accessible to our stakeholders, our parents, our teachers, and others. That process, I think, is important. And even though the open meetings law only require a minimum of 24 hours. That's the letter of the law. But to really meet and to reach out to our stakeholders, giving them just 24 hours, if we truly are intended on trying to communicate to them and keep them informed and up to speed on what's going on, I'd really like to see at least what I originally suggested, a week, or the 4 or 5 days that we do now provide in notice for our school board meetings. So I'd like you to, I know we're not voting on this tonight, so right now is not the time to move an amendment, but I'd like to think about that. Giving parents who have a busy schedule, others notice that a particular thing is going to be on an agenda, whether it's facilities, whether it's diversity, whether it's, whatever committee, gives them time to make arrangements, to be able to be at that committee meeting, to listen to what's going on, what policy is going to be brought forward to this board. And I think that's, really increases our trustworthiness with the community, that we're going up and above the letter of the law and simply following the 24-hour requirement. So I'd like you to think about that, and we'll talk about it when it's on the agenda for approval.
We did discuss that, I would say somewhat at length, and the one, the thing that we kept coming back to is that, currently our leadership team is meeting on the Monday, on the opposite Monday of when our meetings are, to set agenda. Is that correct? So, correct. So you'll meet next Monday to set the following Monday's agenda. And so they're meeting on a Monday, giving that agenda back to staff to prepare documents at that point. And the big key, we don't want staff rushed, and so they're finding out, at the end of the day on Monday or on Tuesday, what documents to prepare, and whatever proper amount of time they need to prepare them and have them correct for us. Because one of my biggest annoyances is when there's a mistake in our board packet, and you know, I haven't seen any for a long time, and so I've been pretty happy about that. And I do not want them rushed. I want them preparing it, and I want the board packet correct rather than done early and with mistakes. And so we did discuss it a lot, and so we took your suggestion and really debated it, and we're comfortable with, I mean, I guess I could ask, we could have somebody look back and see how far in advance we do get this out. Are we normally getting it out on Thursday, or is it late Wednesday, or, when that is? I don't know what the history of it is. I know when I know I typically download it on my computer on Friday, and I take a couple reads at it over the weekend, and so I don't know how early we actually do get
Tim,
it out.
I'm not talking about board minutes, meetings, plans, anything. I'm talking about notifying the community when our committee meetings are. Right now, we do a poor job of notifying when those meetings are. There's sporadically thrown on the website once in a while, and we're not meeting the current law of open meeting laws related to committees.
We are. I don't think that's true at all.
No.
There have been a number of committees not posted on our website. And if they're not posted on the website, where are they posted?
Lewis, the website is not the official location of
So
which
where
they
are
are
they
to be
posted?
posted. They're to be posted on a bulletin board in this building currently. If I am wrong, please inform me.
No, that's correct, and they're also presented to the newspaper.
Right.
And I have no support of changing it. It hamstrings administration to get a board packet out. And I think we do a fabulous job of notifying our stakeholders well in advance of meeting dates.
Okay.
I mean, I want to know specifically who's upset about this. I haven't heard anything about it.
I'd love to expand our
I'm not
outreach,
talking about board meetings.
No, I know, committee meetings.
Talking about committee meetings.
Committee meetings.
And simply going above and beyond the 24-hour requirement and letting parents know in more than that short period of time when our meetings are. That's all I'm asking for, is a little more transparency that relates directly to the goal that we agreed on in having a better, more transparent system of communication with them.
I just disagree. That's not in practice what we're doing.
Okay.
It's not 24 hours.
I want to jump in too before it gets contentious. There's one real key reason from a policy standpoint why I have a hard time putting in a physical date when there is a law on the books that gives us guidance. And the reason why I, writing policy, don't want to do that is if that law changes, now I have to rewrite my policy. When I identify in the policy that we are going to follow the guidance of the law, I keep my policy fluid regardless of what that law ends up being on any given occasion. We historically, in practice, are posting these things at least 72 hours in advance, if not further. We have not, in practice, posted them on our website, but we are not required by law to do so, and our website is not the official location of which they are to be posted, but rather, like the newspaper, a courtesy. We want to do that courtesy. We want to make sure people know. But we're having a hard time with the idea of posting a formal agenda a week in advance, because if we put it out there, even as an informal agenda, it now becomes a formal agenda. We need to let our staff have time to prepare.
Is there any other support for this notion that Lewis is suggesting?
So
And we've still got this. Go ahead.
I just have a question. So if it's 3 board members that convene, and I'm absolutely fine with posting these agendas, but is it our obligation to post them 24 hours in advance? Is that certainly that's our practice? Is that our requirement? Is that the legal requirement?
That's your legal requirement under the law, is only 24 hours. And what I'm suggesting is that we just do it a little bit longer. And the public notice requirement by law does refer to tentative agenda. It doesn't say that you have to have the finalized agenda. It can be a tentative agenda. I'm reading it actually from ICA section 21.4 on my laptop right now. So that's specifically what it says. You can do a tentative agenda and notice it prior to it. Again, I'm just making the suggestion that we be a little more open, since that was the goal, one of our 5 goals that we've been talking about recently for the board for 2016 and 17.
If you read the minutes, they frequently state when the next meeting is to be held. Part of the problem with posting is that there are a lot of times we don't have the meeting organized until 30 hours before the meeting. We can try and pick dates. Our last meeting, we ended up, we met here before the board meeting because we had to cancel 5 or 6 different meetings to get everyone there. So it's not a matter of not wanting to give transparency and letting people know where we're at. It's a matter of if we post it and cancel it and they show up, they're not going to be very happy. But in any event, most of the minutes tell you when the next meetings are.
All right, any other discussion? Move on to policies to announce. We'll have GCI, Certified Administrative Staff Assignments and Transfers, GDI, Support Staff Assignments and Transfers, and GDL, Support Staff Professional Development Opportunities for review and public comment. Anything, Rodney or Tim, on those?
I don't have anything to add to them at this time.
No, I mean, it's really just wording on, it's, changing things like the word employees to administrators may move something, and, just correcting terminology is what the most of this was.
All right, moving on to consent. I'll take a motion.
Move approval of the consent items as presented.
Second.
Moved by Rasmussen, second by Rosser. Discussion, Dr. Taylor.
Got the minutes from the regular meeting held on November 7, claims and payroll, and also a financial report for October 2016 from Chris Densland. We do have one personnel report and also gifts to the district that include cash in the amount of $300 from Dr. and Mrs. Stephen Mead on behalf of Polly and Bill Malone to the Meeker Media Center, and some watercolor paints, paper, and assorted art paper from Shashi Sukatmi to the Ames High School Art Department. Will certainly send a letter of recommendation or a letter of thank you to both of those people. And also there are a couple contracts for board consideration, including the one for the asset services to conduct an inventory of fixed assets that Chris talked about at our last meeting, and a cooperative agreement with Grand Canyon University in Phoenix for a student-teacher placement in the Ames schools, and also continuous open enrollment.
Any other discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 16.
I move the board approve the revised policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Rasmussen, second by Briggs. Discussion.
Have we gotten any other feedback via emails or anything that we haven't heard about? All right.
All right, proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 17.
I move the board approve change order number 1 to the contract with Jensen Builders LTD for the facilities management and bus storage project in the amount of $60,573.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, second by Esposito. Discussion.
I would say, so what you're seeing here is a little bit different process as we're managing this without the assistance of Taylor Odie Kitchell. So from a facilities committee perspective, Jerry brings these, and we ask some questions and ask him to examine these, and we've seen these a couple of times, and he prepared these to bring forward. The big one here is expanding some of the surface area of our paving, kind of filling out some of the edges, so to speak, to facilitate the ease of bus flow. We put that through a pretty good set of scrutiny with Jerry, and he insisted that it would be not only good value, but secondly valuable for the district. I think Bill or I could answer some of these questions. Jerry can certainly answer most of them. I would say one to be prepared for, and you saw this maybe in the Facilities Committee minutes. Chris and Jerry are working on a scenario where we would buy diesel fuel in bulk for the fueling of our district fleet and be able to see some savings as a result of that. So if and when that comes to fruition, that we'll see some some capital dollars being spent to facilitate that, and hopefully then some corresponding pretty quick actually payback on the operating side of things. So.
Other discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 18.
I move to approve the request to School Budget Review Committee for modified allowable growth for increasing enrollment, open enrollment out, and limited English proficiency instruction beyond 5 years in the amount of $236,982.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, second by Rasmussen. Discussion.
Can I just get a quick clarification? Because I think I get it, but the open enrollment out, help me understand why we need modified allowable growth for that number.
Chris is going to help you with this one. It's, here we go into school finance, but don't let your eyes roll back in your head.
It's a timing issue. It's those that open and roll out after our count date from the year before. So if we would have a student that moves to Ames and immediately opens and rolls out, but it's after the count date, we have to send the money to the other district, but we don't get, they're not in our count, so they're giving us spending authority on the backside so that we can at least raise the cash for what we're out.
Okay, so it's after our certified count. I was
Yes.
confused because our open enrollment number has gone down, but
these are just
these are the
ones
ones
that
after
didn't
the
get
count
on
date,
the
but
count
still
at
in
all.
that school year.
Right.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 19.
I move the board approve change order number 10 to the contract with Brockway Mechanical and Roofing Company, Inc. on the Fellows Project in the amount of add $2,520.49. And I move the board approve change order number 8 to the contract with Van Bonnen Electric, Inc. on the Fellows Project in the amount of add $1,954.99.
Second.
Moved by Esposito, second by Talbot. Discussion.
I would just categorize these as bump-up items, and one of the suggestions I gave to Dr. Taylor after the last meeting is things are, I think, settled down enough here where we could probably have kind of a final report from TOK on how the elementary program finished up.
And I did talk with Steve Lang this morning about that exact same thing. So I think on December 5, he was going to meet with Chris, make sure everybody's numbers are the same, and we'll have something to you on December 5 relative to the elementary projects and change orders and the whole works.
All right, proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Items on the board.
I had the good fortune of meeting with Vicki Hales last week and seeing some of the students working in the entrepreneurial program. I think people would be amazed if they really dug into what kind of opportunities we give our students at this high school. What used to be an old DECA program, which meant that the ladies that I went to high school with that weren't going to college would go work in an office in the afternoon. What that's evolved into is a program that teaches young folks about what a business is, how to plan a business project. And, frankly, I was really impressed. Good job, Vicki.
And she's continuing to work to expand that for our kids at Ames High. And it is a whole different approach than the old DECA program. And I think kids really enjoy it more and get into project-based learning. It's a pretty good thing.
I had the opportunity last week to go down to the Iowa Association of School Boards conference and every year I'm reminded of what a good resource that is and how uplifted I feel coming out of that after a day of comparing notes with other board members from other districts, but also just hearing some of the speakers and getting their perspective. You do a nice job.
And I'm happy to hear we're going to be discussing the Promise of Iowa. I know a few of us attended that session, and I look forward to that discussion.
I'd say the IASB convention was, what one was that? I'm not sure which one that was for me, number 4, and was by far my favorite and best learning opportunities that I've had so far. So I'd sure encourage everybody to attend if at all possible.
While I didn't have the opportunity to go to the convention this year because of school, I did have the opportunity to attend our legislative forum with regards to schools and our local representation, and it was a good conversation. I would say I'm cautiously optimistic coming out of it that there's a chance we might finally be winning over some opinions about doing a little bit more reform with regards to school structure and how our finances are used, but it's going to be a long journey going forward.
And you did a good job bringing that question up, and then a few other people in the crowd kind of trumped that question, and the topic kind of got missed, and so I appreciate you taking the lead on that and getting that out.
Every year I say it, and just on behalf of the board, I would like to thank all of our staff, administration, and our teachers for the great work they do. With Thanksgiving upcoming, we have a wonderful district, and our staff truly value the role they play, I think, in helping our kids learn. So every time I see my kids go off to school, I'm so appreciative of those teachers. So thank you for all the hard work. Items from staff.
Actually, I wanted to thank the United Board for being here this evening. We had our annual joint meeting with them and talked over several issues, including some curriculum and transportation and the normal things relative to our sharing agreement, which expires in about 2 years. We were happy to hear that they're discovering that a majority of their kids who are leaving 6th grade have that opportunity, or 5th grade have that opportunity to go to Boone or surrounding schools, but a majority are coming to Ames, and we'd like to think it's because of our programming and our staff and what we have to offer for kids. So it was really a nice meeting, and look forward to that on an annual basis, and thank them for being here to share their experience. A couple things that were just touched upon also on our property sales. I wanted to mention that we have had contact with the acceptable bidders that were identified by the board to come forward with a little bit more detail, and also some initial bids relative to the properties that we have up for sale, including Crawford, the old Edwards building, and the old maintenance building. And as Luke mentioned, we had some very nice meetings with the neighborhood associations from Crawford and Old Edwards during the day, and so those meetings were very productive. Just wanted to bring that up. I did let the board know, Jerry, that the other good news relative to the Phase 2 environmental site assessment for the maintenance building came back clean, which I think was a very pleasing move on our part. At least it was something I think that we can celebrate from that standpoint. So as we prepare to sell that property, we know that we have some environmental things that are going right. I did just hand out to the board, and there's another copy that's being distributed around, I think, from Director Rosser. I want to say this is our final certified enrollment chart. At least I want to put it that way. And you notice that our weighted enrollment on item 7 is up 6.79, which is down a couple from where we were before. But again, the important part in my mind is that our resident public students attending the district is up about 19, and overall we're serving 51 more students this year than we did last year. Hence, a little bit of that, Elisa, relative to the modified allowable growth. I know that in our previous one we had identified some numbers relative to open enrollment in and open enrollment out, but still our current show that we've got 184 kids that are open enrolling out, 406 open enrolling in, and I would repeat that in 2010 those numbers were just about even at 200 and 200. So again, programming, facilities, build it and they will come. I think there's lots of good reasons and lots of good things that we're doing for kids in Ames that help us with our certified enrollment to see that that's a growing thing. And that ties very well, I think, with to what you mentioned, Director Franson, which is the IESB resolution that is called the Promise of Iowa. We received this as a result of the work of the IESB convention this week, but we received it on Friday, so it's impossible for us to get it on the agenda tonight for board action, but it also does place into position the ability to have a discussion about this resolution. The IESB leadership and the result of that convention is asking for school districts across Iowa to join in on a resolution called the Promise of Iowa as a public education support program to focus attention on the future of Iowa public schools and public school students and to rally citizen support for investment in public education from our state legislature. So I wanted to make sure the board and those had a copy of that resolution this evening so that you can review it. We will put it on for an action item at our next meeting on December 5, which I think is still not too late to meet what we had hoped to accomplish that way. It was also mentioned that last Wednesday on the 16th, Dr. Ross and Deborah Reed from the Iowa Reading Research Center, along with Jonas Michael and some members from our CNI staff, including Dan Andrews and Mary Morton, met with about 23 parents, mostly from fellows at the request of the fellows PTO co-presidents. And that was about a 3-hour meeting where we shared concerns and asked questions about the literacy pilot that we're conducting in grades K through 2. I wanted to give a lot of thanks also to our teaching and learning committee, Lisa and Tim, for being there that evening. And Thursday night on November 17th, we hosted, in collaboration with the Iowa State School of Education and in collaboration with the Ames Public Library, the first parent reading camp, which was kind of exciting too. Reading camp, C-A-M-P. I saw that scowl, Tim. I thought I would spell that out in case I stuttered a little. It was from 8:30 to 8 here in the boardroom, and Dr. Ross, I think, started that meeting with Mitchell kindergarten teacher Charlene Mason and Sawyer instructional coach Autumn Sealer, I believe. And what they were doing was sharing an overview of what early literacy instructional block looks like. Dr. Connie Beecher and Dr. Emily Hayden from Iowa State shared strategies that parents can use at home with their young readers, and Jerry Hyde from the Ames Public Library got everyone up and moving before she shared ideas about helping young readers, I believe, pick out books and how parents can engage kids in reading those books. So I think it was really a very successful initial parent reading camp. And Dr. Ross tells me she anticipates at least 2 additional reading camps before the end of the year. So I think that's really a pretty good outreach from our CNI staff, the library, and also Iowa State University for that evening. And I think the last but not least on my list, we need to take into account that we do have Thanksgiving that is coming up. We will have an early release on Wednesday afternoon. So our kids will be getting out early to start the Thanksgiving break. We are expecting good things, I think, as we're coming up from our legislators. We did have a legislative forum here last week for a couple hours, and even though it got testy at times amongst the legislators, we're hopeful that they're going to be able to throw their partisanship away and do what's best for kids. And we also met with the iLead group. Directors Franson, Director Ross, Director Briggs, I believe, was there that night too, as we met with the ISU students who are soon to graduate in the College of Education and become teachers. The night was really spent talking about resumes and how resumes can play such an important role in getting jobs down the road, so it was really good. We look forward to an audit report coming up, and also we'll be getting a negotiation strategy so we can get the board involved in that as time moves on. Our first negotiation session will probably be sometime in January, so we'll be having some closed sessions relative to negotiation strategy as we move along. And also in our December, either the first or the second meeting, I want to come back with our administrative team response to the board goals, which would include an action plan and also give you your first update on what we're trying to accomplish or how we're trying to accomplish those, help you assist in accomplishing your board goals. So your first update will come in December, and you'll receive our response to that. Other than that, I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Get some relaxing time.
I have two things. This is your quick gavel, Luke. One, the promise of education thing is really, and it kind of states it here, but it's a public relations campaign. And that helped me get that when I went to that session. So while there's a resolution here and whatnot, it's more public relations is kind of the first step. So it's maybe not as intimidating as I thought it would be in terms of making a commitment. Secondly, related to open enrollment, Dr. Taylor, one thing I find useful is comparative districts in Story County open enrollment, if we can assemble that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm particularly interested at now how these numbers are, how the spread is growing versus out and in. How hard would it be to identify, like by grade, how many are going out and how many are coming in? Is that info readily available, or would you have to dig and dig and dig?
It won't take much digging. We'll have it for you.
Okay, because I have a suspicion that I know what the answer is, but I don't know that I know what the answer is.
And we've asked for that. You know, we did some of that just by the district level, you know, a couple years ago, and when we saw that the spread was going back in the positive direction. You know, and that Dr. Taylor mentioned it, and that was a scary time, I thought, because I kind of red flagged this to the previous administration when the trend was getting incredibly close to you know, even between the ones that were open rolling out and the ones that were open rolling in. It was, you know, within 10 or whatever. And I went to the previous admin when it got down to 24, and I just said, you know, if you're following this trend, it's just going to be a couple more years, and all of a sudden we're losing students due to open enrollment, which has never happened in the history of the open enrollment law, that Ames has lost students. This district has always gained more than it's lost, and to see these numbers, you know, this difference over 200 more coming in is outstanding. And you know, it wasn't that long ago that it was almost dead even. And so this is some impressive work by the staff and the teachers of this district, and I mean, I can't applaud that enough. So that's great.
And this board played a very important role in that also. I can assure you actually the tone and tenor and work of this board is just not confined just to Ames. Other people are watching, so it plays a very important role in that, Tim.
Gotta get some credit to
What?
Gotta get some credit to this.
Oh yeah, and of course the work of our ambassadors, and I wanted to make sure Kathy got her due on this one too. She's worked very hard on the communication marketing of the district, much harder than I think people realize, because it kind of goes under the radar quite a bit. So I'm glad she poked me in the arm and said, "Don't forget us." And really, the ambassador programs and many other things that she happens to be doing with the website redesign and those things are naturally making our district more attractive. So that marketing is very important too. Thanks, Kathy, for the reminder.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Franson, second by Briggs. Discussion. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. We're adjourned.